go out and play, and play, and play even more. Good day, and welcome to the Create, Play, Live show. I am your host, Nanette Saylor, and today I am blessed to have with me a very special guest, Gail Cohen, who is not only an incredible artist and creator, but a beautiful personal friend. And I can't wait for our conversation today and to share it with all of you. Gail is a contemporary mixed media and figurative painter, especially, and she is particularly passionate about illustrating a creative woman's journey. Her paintings, her art explores every part of what it means to be a creator as a woman in your day-to-day life, and it's absolutely magical to watch her in her process. She is also a gifted healing arts facilitator, and I am privileged to share with her the experience of our HeARThlife circles and some healing arts work that we are currently doing together in a variety of ways. So without further ado, I want to introduce you all to Gail Cohen, my special guest. Welcome, Gail.
Hello, thank you for inviting me today.
I am so glad to have you here. You know, we have so much fun creating together, and we experience so much expansion and so much joy and so much just real connection to ourselves and to our world through the time that we spend together, that I wanted really today to highlight and to invite people into that experience with us. And it's, you know, it feels, when you and I are together and we're creating alone, it's a wonderful experience. And every time I leave, I think, how is it possible? How can it be possible for us to invite more people into this experience?
Mm-hmm.
And so one of the ways that I am hoping to do that is through this show, through the Create, Play, Live show, and these conversations with beautiful, magical creators like you. So to start our conversation today, I thought I would ask, since we really are focused on this idea of creating, what does it mean to you to create? And how did you come to this place of appreciating how vital it is for your life force to have ongoing, regular experiences of making things?
That's a really long conversation, and I'll try to minimize the amount of time and words that I have to describe my exploration and my having the honor and the gratitude I have in being able to create as much as I do, and have over the last only 10 years. And I'm nearing almost the 6th decade of my life. And until less than 10 years ago, creativity was really limited to, and I'm not minimizing this as a creative experience, it was really it was limited to probably decorating my home, choosing clothing in a certain way, and using a little bit of fashion in my life, and color. But being a visual artist was totally absent from my life since I was a child, a very young child. And I don't even know if that lasted for much longer than, I'd say, nursery school and kindergarten. And pretty much the point where some people were deemed artists and some people were deemed children who play. And that was it. I almost feel like I was robbed of all those years that I could have been creating. However, I've met so many artists who were trained throughout their lives and who were turned off by classical teaching and to-do lists and the idea of right and wrong ways to do art.
Yes.
So perhaps my time was kind of waiting in the wings, so to speak, and the immersion and the ability to do to be an art maker, a creative, came to me later in life. Maybe I would say when I needed it most. And just to get quickly into how it started is I was going through a difficult period in my life, and you may hear of struggles of many famous artists, and I don't want to be put in that category because the suffering and grief and loss and all those things, and I have a chronic pain condition, brought me to the place I am today, and allowed me to just immerse myself in terms of feeling and emotion rather than in any technical sides of art. So it was really just, how could I do I didn't even ask myself that question. I just literally found myself drawing on a glass, literally a water glass. It was before the days that we were using water bottles to such a horrible extent. And I was drawing with Sharpies on glass, and I started to see fun designs coming out. And I think my mom introduced me to a little bit of decoupage on glass after that, and that wasn't enough. And I took a collage class at a local art school, and I had always loved seeing figurative art, especially of women, pretty much exclusively of women, or sometimes couples, and wondered how people do that. I was just in awe of that. And I ended up taking a drawing class, a live figure model class, and the teacher was, she was kind of mean. She was kind of difficult and hard on everybody. But the fact is, I saw that I had the potential to make shapes that looked like women, and I just kept going. And next thing I knew, I was adding figures to my collages. The funny way is, and I've still continued to do that, is I don't really use references ever. So as much as I know how to draw the figure looking at a figure now, not realistically, but more stylized, in a stylized way, I would look at my collage and find figures in my collage. I would find a head or an arm, or it's kind of like when you're outside, and we've done this throughout our lives, is looking up at the clouds. And I know you and I have talked about this magical experience that people do every day and don't even realize they're being creatives when they're doing it, is looking up at the clouds and seeing, a bunny or a dog or a person,
alligator,
whatever, an alligator in the sky. So, I mean, if that's not being creative, I don't know what is. And we do it all the time. And just to get back quickly, is that I did start to see figures and shapes in my collages and would draw them out. And one thing led to another. And next thing I knew, I was being invited to participate in a master's class at the school, because this extraordinary teacher thought that I was capable of being in a classroom full of people who've been painting their entire lives. Some of them were in their 70s and 80s. And one thing led to another. I enjoyed that, but I just found myself creating much more freely and attentively on my own at home. And I would just put on music. Pardon me?
Isn't that interesting? I think how it for some people, the idea that coming together in a class, in an instruction where you have support of others there to guide and to direct you is important. And what I hear you describing is that that was a catalyst for you, but where you really came alive was in your own space and without the restrictions, if you will, of the rules of a classroom setting.
Right. I don't, yes, I agree with that. I didn't feel, well, it's interesting because I didn't feel instructed in the class. There was definitely nice facilitation, but when people come together, especially women, we end up talking. And so that was, as much as that was something that was great because I've lost a lot of connections through my chronic illness and have become very isolated. I love that, but yet I feel that perhaps I was restricted by time constraints, by having to schlep all the materials back and forth, and knowing that I wanted to do so much more while I was there and didn't have the opportunity. At home, there are no limits and there are no time limits and no constraints, although I have put constraints on myself because there was a point in my life where my husband would find me in the garage at 4:00 in the morning because I had this amazing idea that I just had to get out of my head and onto paper. And I definitely limit myself now. And by 7:00, the latest, the lights are off in my little art studio upstairs. And I have quiet time with him. But he's never asked me to do it because he sees that I am at my happiest and joyful when I am creating. So people around me definitely see that creativity sparks some beauty and life within me that was not there otherwise and would not be there otherwise.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing that is so important to me in terms of spreading the word, if you will, that this notion that there's a life force that is part of the creative energy that changes us when we engage in any kind of practice of creation. And so tell me a little bit about what your creative ritual looks like.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
You get inspired.
Well, I have to say that for all the negative talk you hear about online forums or groups or chat, well, it's not really chats anymore, but I guess Facebook is a giant chat room. I have gained so much from the connections I've made on Facebook and taking workshops online, creative workshops from people who, my favorite people are intuitive painters, expressive painters who don't necessarily have a plan when they paint, but are in the forefront of and are moved by expressing themselves intuitively. And that means not being, I have to add another piece of that, but I'm just going to say, and then I'll lead into it, is that not being self-critical or judgmental about what they're doing as they engage in the process, but rather play as if they were still in a childlike, curious, intuitive, adventurous state of mind. And those are the people who inspire me the most and who have been inspired through their art workshops. And I'll name a few in a little while. And I continue to check in with them once in a while. None of them have ongoing workshops right now that I haven't already taken or paid for. But I do have some in my library that were purchased that I have for life. And when I'm not in a creative mood to actually paint or draw, I will turn back and look at and watch them paint. And it's been proven through studies that even watching somebody else create or somebody else painting, drawing, dancing, singing, that does something to our brains, stimulates something in our brains, and almost mimics and possibly very close to mimicking the actual act of creating itself. And it turns out, it lights up those sensors in the brain that we would have lit if we ourselves were engaged in creativity as individuals.
Wow.
So just quickly.
That's such an important point. I really want to emphasize that what you're saying is that our brain response is very similar if we're simply watching someone else create.
So I've been told, and so studies have shown. And when I was, God, I can't remember how many years ago it was. I'd say it's about at least 7 years ago. I found out about a program at Shands, related to Shands Hospital in Gainesville, Florida, and it's through the University of Florida, and it's called the Arts in Medicine program, and it still exists. And in fact, it's become a master's program. It's gone from a intensive certificate summer program to a master's program and a research program, and it's even expanded into different parts of the world to help people across the world engage in art making who wouldn't otherwise do so. Yeah. And I did take that course, and I moved there for several weeks, and it was beautiful. And in the mornings, we would learn about the history of art making and its profound effect on people who are ill or who have looked for healing in their lives, and which historically it's the oldest form of expression, and it's the earliest medicine that was used for people, was music and dance, and still is through many indigenous cultures. And this taught me to, again, it was about back to that whole art of play, that it doesn't matter if you're an artist or you're a non-artist, with big quotes around it and capital letters, because as long as you're engaging in any type of creative pursuit, again, even if it's passive in terms of listening to somebody read a poem or write or singing or dancing, watching somebody dance, these doctors in the hospital were prescribing to their patients, for their patients, in their notes, music, dance, writing, visual arts, etc., etc. And it was the most beautiful thing that I've ever seen, honestly, how Western medicine and creative pursuits were enmeshed within a doctor's notes.
Yeah.
I mean,
amazing.
If that isn't integrative medicine and functional medicine dealing with the person as a whole being, then I don't know what is. I don't know. It was really profound and definitely had an effect on me, and always will have an effect on me throughout my life, and has been a reminder to me through my own healing journey that staying creative in any way possible, whether it's looking at art books, whether it's walking through an art fair, going to a museum, listening to music, talking about art like we are right now, is wholesome. It's definitely wholesome, and a life-affirming experience.
So beautiful.
I don't know if
I'm so grateful to share the time we shared together where you are able to use that experience and hold the space of non-judgment. I think that's so, so important. And 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 then this idea of playing without worry about what the outcome is going to be, and just simply continuing until you get to a place that you want to stop.
For that day. Because there's always another day to continue or look back and say, oh, wouldn't it be fun to add something new? And each time you look at a piece, if it's a piece of visual art, each time you look at that piece of art, it will look different to you.
Yeah.
And each day you come in with new experiences and new ideas and new insight. And maybe you saw color that day that inspired you, and you might feel like adding it to the piece that you did a month ago or 2 months ago. And you and I have seen that ourselves.
And I think that's the other thing that I've learned from watching you work and playing with you is this idea that I can come back to the piece from a different perspective, and I shift it and morph it, and that's okay. That it doesn't, that it continues to have a life. I think that's the thing that has really been really anchored for me, this idea that the piece has a life.
I love when you say that, because it really adds to, it could turn out not as pretty as it was. I mean, you could end up covering something that you really loved. And I love what you're saying, though, that it has a life, meaning that whatever you've done in previous layers or previous areas, whether it's covered or not, it exists in there, and it exists as a moment in time, having affected you in whatever way it did then. And it's a great metaphor for life, for the textures of life, and for how things come and go, and how the impermanence of things in our lives and people and experiences, and how we might be remorseful or regretful, or can say, we wish this wasn't ending, whether it's a vacation or an experience with somebody. But it makes us richer for having experienced it, even if just for a moment. Even if it was just meeting a stranger for a moment in time and hearing their story, or just exchanging a smile. That's part of the texture of our lives.
Yeah. It's such an interesting, those metaphors play out over and over and over again in the time that we create, and yet we don't sit there and have a conversation with ourselves about those metaphors at that moment, right?
We feel it.
We feel it. Yeah, exactly. And we don't even, I don't even go back and gaze at my creation and say, well, oh, I see that it, from an intellectual perspective, I don't overanalyze the thing when it's all done. Mm-hmm. It just has a feeling. It has an essence. It has a beingness that is an expression of, and I love that you said this earlier, it's an expression of that, of me in that moment in time. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And that's, I think, how what has circled around now in this this cycle of my creating is this notion that this beingness continues to alter, and that's by design. We as human beings, we are intended to live and grow and thrive, and each experience we have adds to that process, and adds to, and then lifts us into the next experience. So
I think that's why I was reading something this morning in a book called The Art of Play, and I haven't read the whole book, but somehow I opened to a page that really resonated with me. In the times that I physically can't paint or draw because, my wrist is hurting a lot. I had an injury about a year ago, and that's been preventing me from doing all the work I'd like to do. But I also play on my iPad, and I have some apps where I could do digital work. And I now have been integrating a lot of my old pieces and new pieces with words. I've definitely been adding a lot of text recently due to some other emotional experiences. And I've been taking pictures of those written words, and they're not clear. They're not even legible. I just do that automatic writing that you positively recommend from, I think it was Julia Cameron's book, The Artist's Way.
Yes.
The morning pages. So I haven't been able to do morning pages because it's difficult for me to write, but I will write down my thoughts from time to time, or talk to somebody on paper who I can't speak to, or just express myself. And I've been taking pictures and integrating that into collages where I meld a painting of a figure and one of my collages or one of my expressive or abstract pieces, and I put it all together. And I read something in this book, The Art of Play, today, that says collage. Could I just read it quickly?
Yeah, absolutely. Please share it.
Sure. It says, and it's by Joan Stanford. It says, collage is also the perfect metaphor for life, mirroring how we create our lives. We take fragments and piece something together. We cut out, we fill in. In integrating a variety of pieces, many totally mismatched, we fashion a hybrid. Each day brings more material to be integrated, and we are never done with the past. Collage contains both the used and the new. We move beyond simplistic notions of one thing, excluding another. Multi-layered, collage serves as a container for a myriad of impressions. And that really describes, that's a nice way to integrate the past and the present, is through collage. And if anybody's done any work with you, Nanette, or on their own with vision boards,
yes,
that's another great way to integrate the past and the present, to take perhaps old personal photos or copies of photos, choosing things from magazines or books or whatever it is, and melding it together and creating a new story.
Yes.
With the old, and integrating the two together, or integrating the 10 or 15 or 50 things together and creating a story with that, and making sense of the world through our years and years of experience from childhood up until this point in our lives, with no end in sight. And that's what I love about it. There is no end to this, and this is something that we can do later on in life until our final years in life. There's really no limit to the amount of creativity we could add to our daily lives.
Yeah, it really is true. And I think about things as simple as the practice of your morning tea, your
you remind me, right? You asked me that question, I never answered. So yes, my tea, my candle, and music as I begin painting, and some beautiful stretches definitely get me going. So go ahead with tea, because that always sparks excitement to me.
Yeah, and isn't it funny how, something as simple as the cup we choose, the flavor that we choose, the aromas that come from that, all of there, and we can create a whole ritual around simply the way that we make our tea in the morning that is a creative process. And I think so often people so many of us, and it was interesting that you shared that in your story you really were not a creative child, and that, or you don't remember that as being
right. I was definitely an athletic child.
Yeah. And so it's interesting that there are many of us that come up in the world with the I'm not creative. I don't have that expression. It's not possible for me to do that. And of course, usually there's some old mean art teacher who told you that your work was terrible. And so you never went beyond that. And what I've discovered with all of the people that I've worked with over the years is that often their creative essence is appearing in other ways. And because from a societal perspective, we've defined creativity in up until recently in very specific ways. Creativity means you're a musician, or you're an artist, or you're a dancer, or
Mm-hmm.
you're a writer. And that was kind of it. That those were
you receive your label early on in life, and that becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy very often, or something that we try to reject our entire lives.
Right, exactly. And so here, so many people have been carrying around this idea that I'm not creative, and they're actually expressing themselves in a myriad of ways on a daily basis. And what I love about the experience that you and I are sharing is that we are coming together to create in your kitchen with materials that are available to anybody, and doing it from this idea that you don't have to be a quote unquote artist. There's nothing fine about the practice that we're doing. We're popping some paint onto the cardboard with our fingers, and
see what happens
around, and we're blobbing things out when they squirt out of the tube and saying, "Oops, isn't that beautiful?" And that's the creative process.
Happy accidents.
Yes, yes, yes. And it's that playfulness, that willingness to just keep allowing it to be is the thing I think that is making the difference for me in my life now. That I don't I have a lot less worry about, what happens if I color outside the lines, right?
But very often when you color outside of the lines, something happens that you could not have planned otherwise.
Exactly. And that's really, I think, so can you think of a time, some experience that you had where where that lesson became so apparent that that shift happened for you from being worried about what the outcome was going to be to allowing yourself to just keep moving forward, to stick with it, and to just let it be whatever it's going to be?
Well, actually, I'm remembering a painful time within the last 10 years. And I love my collage class, and I love the teacher in that class. And she was fun and inspiring and engaging and curious and crazy in the coolest way possible. And then one day she said, she gave me a parameter and said, she suggested that I work really big. And she had this idea that I create a really big box. And I had somebody create, I think it was like a 6-foot box for me. So somebody could walk around it. Literally, it had 4 sides, a top and a bottom. And she thought I should collage all the sides of this. And I had somebody build this. And I looked at this box, and a sense of panic set in. And I have to tell you that for almost 2 years, I did not, never mind go back to class, I did not put my pen to paper. I did not do a collage. I could not even open an art book. I had this, I don't know what happened to me, but it was such a negative experience. Wow. Where I guess I was never good at following rules. And having this, suddenly this literally put me in a box. And I felt like I couldn't escape, and I was really lost. So I think what happened, what brought me out of that was, I believe I went to a museum, and it was really hard for me to walk through that door. And I started walking through, and I just recognized that there are so many different types of art and styles. And yes, all of those masters who created the expressionist paintings and the modernists and all these people were classically trained, and they had to jump out of their boxes too and start creating from an emotional, from a visceral level, and express themselves that way. And just taking that stroll and starting to open art books and seeing that there are no rights and wrongs, and that I shouldn't cage myself in, never mind allowing somebody else to do it, helped me a lot. And then I took a workshop online with a very popular teacher and a wonderful artist, and I loved her work. I found it online, and I researched how I could take a class with her. She did an e-course. It was Flora Bowley. Has an incredible e-course called Bloom True. And she, again, was trained throughout her life. And I believe her people in her family, her mom maybe was an artist, and she was inspired by people her whole life. And yet she went out on her own and started to play. And I don't remember what her turning moment was or her Bloom True moment was, but all her work begins with play. And she taught me through the class, and then I went to meet her in San Miguel de Allende several years ago with another group of wonderful women. Some were trained artists and many were not. They just came there to play with her. Through music and movement and throwing paint on the canvas, literally dripping and spraying and just letting it all go. That taught me. And then the images came later, and some didn't have images other than symbols or shapes or, whatever designs they chose to have in their pieces. Again, no right or wrong. It was simply engaging in art making and in play. It wasn't even art making. It was playing until something felt good. And she had an expression, work with what's working at some point. So we didn't have to invent anything. We chose images from our everyday lives. So when you take a walk, what are you attracted to? And we would try to draw that out, even if it was just a squiggle to represent something. And another teacher, Robert Burge, does the same thing. But I mean, his images are a little more realistic, but more stylized, I would say. He loves to play. And I've taken his workshops, and that's so much fun because he laughs at himself a lot and just laughs at the process a lot. And it was just another wonderful experience. And there's several teachers online that are approachable and provide these classes at not, such a great expense. I know that people are limited, but again, materials are variable, and you've taught this, Nanette, through our workshops, that anything is, I want to say fodder, but anything potential art material. And I very often use magical tools that I could make up. I could tie grass together and paint with that. And any tools in your drawer or your closet are definitely tools that we could use for art. When you don't have to use nail polish. Which
I love that magical tools. We're gonna have to work more with those magical.
That's gonna be fun. That's definitely fun. I'm gonna have you creating tools that you will look at me and say, Gail, do you think this is okay? This is legal? But everything is definitely a potential tool for creativity. And every surface is as well. And just quickly, the same way that we see things in clouds, I could be in a bathroom or in my living room and look at the floor, and I'll see somebody dancing, and definitely, it's not because I'm a strange person, but it's because I'm paying attention, I think.
Right.
Or,
it really is interesting. Thank you for sharing that, because that idea of paying attention, that idea of curiosity,
mm-hmm.
that notion that when we look with the eyes of a child, right, we see things, we see imaginary things, because we're imagining them and we're bringing them to life, and
we want to see them. We
yeah,
choose to see them.
yeah, and what, and again, with no limits, that there's nobody, when you get to the space that you and I have gotten to, where we really are comfortable in the idea that there don't have to be rules by someone else's standards. That if I choose to see an alligator in my cloud today, that's okay. And if I look down and there's a smudge on the carpet and it looks like a flower, or it looks like a heart, or it looks like a person, that's a beautiful thing. And it colors my world in a way that makes everything more joyful. And
Right.
and that's the point, isn't it? Right.
Right. And I guess whether you choose, I might, tap my husband on the shoulder and say, do you see that? But creativity could be a private notion, and the same way journaling and scribbling is a private thing. It doesn't have to be shared with anybody. Nobody needs to see, what you do, what you think when it comes to creativity. Yes,
Yeah.
if you want to cook a wonderful meal and add color and aromas to it, and you want to share that with somebody, that's a beautiful gift. But if you choose to have a meal on your own and appreciate it, and even if you take a picture of it, you don't need to share that on Instagram or on Facebook. That's for your own pleasure, your own viewing pleasure, as they say.
Yeah.
And that's an experience that can continue throughout time, and it's yours alone. Or you could share it with others around you, but it's not necessary. It's
Right.
really not necessary. So yes, you might see did you say an alligator or a dragon in the class? Or both. Or an alligator talking to a dragon.
Yes.
So that could be your private experience, Nanette, or it could be something that you share with somebody else.
Right.
So I think a lot of people are afraid to create because they don't feel their ability is up to par with others and don't want to show it to anybody else. But it's important to know that you don't have to show it to anybody.
Right. Yeah, it doesn't, and I think that's the other evolutionary lesson in the process of creating, when you do this with regularity, is that what happened for me is that I got to a place where I didn't need other people to validate my work.
That's it.
Right. And that's when the private process of creating becomes so powerful, because it is purely your own. And then what a beautiful thing, from that place of truth and understanding and knowing, you release it into the world if you so choose.
Right. There is one small danger in that, and I might find myself caught up in that at times, is that you go from private to public and you get positive validation. And what happens when the critics arrive and they remind you that something, according to them, and you have to remember it's a subjective thing when somebody's judging your art or your creative, whatever you've done, whether it's food or your music or something that you've created visually, what happens then? And it's really important, really essential, that we don't become dependent on that validation.
Yes. Right.
That we have to go back to the child, like, okay, remind ourselves why we are doing this in the first place.
Yes.
I mean, when you start selling your art, I have my artwork now in a local gallery. I am curious each month as to whether people are commenting on my artwork or paying for it. And it's nice to hear that people are expressing appreciation for my art, even when they don't purchase it. I'm not in a place where right now I'm dependent on that to make a living. But if I were, it would probably be a different experience for me, because I would need the validation and I would need the monetary gain from it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
there would be a fine line, but we're not talking about that today. I think what we're talking about today really is creativity for creative sake, for creativity's sake, and play for play's sake, and enjoyment for enjoyment's sake, and nothing more, nothing less.
Right. And how that all informs our lives in a way that becomes more uplifting, more joy-filled, more experiential, more expansive, more. Yeah.
More, right.
Yeah.
Because it will add more to your life.
Yeah, it really does.
It's like hearing a new song for the first time that you really appreciate.
And what a beautiful thing when you can allow your creative time, your practice, whatever it looks like, to take on a life of its own, because then you do have these, every time you sit down, you have some kind of a new experience.
Right. And the more you do, I want to say the better you will be at it, but the more you will trust yourself. So it's not a matter of becoming better. You will trust yourself and you will understand the process better. You'll understand what materials work well together. Again, let's go back to cooking. When you mix two things together that don't taste good, you probably won't use those two items together again.
Yeah.
So, and you might research or look at cookbooks or go online and get ideas from other people. It doesn't mean that you need to create exactly what they're creating, but pick up bits and pieces from different teachers and different artists and different books. And just really, if I have nothing else to add, it would be just to really be attentive to your environment every day, whether it's the things that you choose in your home, the shapes around you, the colors in your wardrobe. All those things will inform and will help you understand yourself more. I don't think people really pay attention to the fact that you're making all those choices every day. And those are creative choices.
Yes.
And that makes me smile because it reminds me that everybody has this innate ability to add more dimension to their lives.
Yes.
And texture to their lives. And I love the word texture because it has so much possibility. And
I do too. That circles us right back to where we started with collage and how collage making was the beginning of your art journey, right?
Right. And Seed the Day is definitely my call to myself and to others. I first started, I don't know if I have time, by not being confident in my artwork. And somebody said, "Why aren't you signing it?" And I said, "Because I don't really feel like it's me creating it." And then the name Gaia came to me, the mythological concept of the creative woman of Mother Nature. And I acknowledged that name, and I embodied that name. I'd say when I was I thought that's who was creating, that it wasn't me, Gail Cohen, it was Gaia. And it was easy for me to sign Gaia to those pieces. And it felt good. Like, wow, not only am I, and I never loved my name. So just omitting the L and adding an A was really natural and very easy. I almost felt like it was meant to be. But at some point I was told by art teachers that I need to put my real name, my given name, on my art pieces so they're recognized that way. And Gaia was much which is much easier to put down there. So seed the day is my way of saying seize the day, but seed the day is planting the possibility through whatever I could do. So when I make my tea in the morning, keeping a pad of watercolor paper or even a napkin next to me with some writing implement, whether it's a pen or a marker, and doodling while my tea is getting ready, or writing some words down that may or may not have any meaning, or a little haiku, starts my day in a positive, creative fashion. And it's something I try to do every day and begin my day that way, as a reminder that there's more than just the doing, there's the feeling and the emotion, and I could record that.
Yes, yes, yes. And then that informs other things throughout your day. So it's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. And, every time we have these conversations, I know we could go on forever and ever and ever. And
yes, we can.
Yes.
And we do.
And we do. And we will again. And so this has been such a pleasure. And I appreciate so much what you bring to me and what you bring to the world and all that you share. And your art is amazing. And and we will look forward to continuing to create together.
Absolutely.
So any last words you'd like to share before we close today?
The last words are, and very importantly, knowing that I began this journey late in life, and I've been told, I think Grandma Moses started in her 60s. I think that was something I read somewhere. Means that I wasn't told, and it was never suggested to me, to become artistic or creative. Although, interestingly enough, I grew up with a mom who was a professional singer and dancer, and you would think that it would have come automatically from that. But even if you didn't grow up in an environment where creativity was nurtured, and you haven't had the academic background to be creative, whether it's musically or visually, if you pay enough attention to what you do every day, what you buy, what you wear, how you decorate your home or your office space, what music you listen to, and what pleases your eye on an everyday basis, you will become more creative in your everyday thinking and in your choices, and your life choices will be altered by that, and all this will be integrated somehow into your future.
It's beautiful.
And possibility is everywhere.
Yeah.
If you pay enough attention.
Possibility is everywhere. That it is. Well, my friend, I am so grateful that you have joined me today.
Thank you so much for having me, Nanette.
And you have shared your story with our listeners and helped us all get a perspective and to remember to add texture to our lives, to really appreciate the texture of our lives. I think is such an important message. And and you use our ability to be attentive and curious to color our lives in ways that really bring more to us.
Right, especially during these times. History has always dictated negative experiences and politics, etc. And I really try to, as much as it might come across my screen or my newspaper, I close that and bring color and beauty to my life in place of that, and remind myself that there's more beauty in the world than there is ugliness or negativity. And that is what I have to force myself and remind myself every day should be the essence of a life well lived. And just being giving and generous to myself and to others in terms of creative experiences and sharing with others. And that's what Nanette and I are doing out there in creative hearths and healing circles. We hope to bring more people inside of our world and provide them with the experiences that we so gratefully share together and on our own.
Yes, and so it is. Thank you, my friend. For now, we will
thank you.
Close this conversation, and we will pick it up again very soon, I'm sure. I'll be looking forward to having you visit us again.
I can't wait. I can't wait.
On a regular basis, because there is so much conversation to be had here in this discussion about how we create, how we play, and how we live our lives. So thank you.
Of course. My pleasure.
Next time.
Until then.
You are listening to the Create, Play, Live show, where women come together to share how curiosity and creativity lead them to extraordinary lives. I'm your host, Nanette Saylor, and I'm honored to share the mic with some truly amazing women who have asked and answered the question, what if we stop adulting and live every day with the curiosity of a child at play? And these enlightening conversations will invite you to let go of outdated standards, make your own rules, and give yourself permission to play more than ever before. You have the power to create your life. Spend some time with us and you'll learn to see life through new eyes and challenge yourself to new possibilities. We may not solve the world's problems, but we will get you to think differently about your own. Come play with us. Listen and subscribe at createplaylive.com.